Good morning, and welcome to day 2 of this year's Mountain Connect program. I'm Jeff Reiman from the Broadband Group, broadcasting today from our company headquarters here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'd like to start off by first thanking Jeff Galinsky for the invitation to participate in this year's program. I really do appreciate the opportunity to contribute to Mountain Connect. Really, since inception, Mountain Connect has distinguished itself as a leading forum for sharing of broadband industry best practices and lessons learned. And as we all know too well, the mission of Mountain Connect, helping to advance the deployment of wired and wireless broadband infrastructure in unserved and underserved markets, is needed now more than ever before. Advancing smart infrastructure, speed, strength, leadership. So much of today's discussion will look at current technologies and future capabilities, but I wanted to lead off by taking a walk back through history, back to 1985, and looking at the drivers and the inputs and the amazing group of industry leaders that came together to plan for and create the industry's first fiber to the home deployment, again, back in 1985. Next, we will take a look how many of the core planning elements that were achieved back at that first fiber to the home project are still being applied today to advance investments in smart infrastructure in fiber networks. And specifically, we will take a look at a leading community in the Mountain West region that in 2005 became home to Colorado's first fiber to the home deployment. And we will examine how they are now continuing to incorporate wired and wireless connectivity as a core element of its community planning priorities as it enters into its next phase of growth. And in the spirit of truly great leadership, I am so pleased to have contributing to this presentation Wes Kelly, the CEO of Huntsville Utilities, who will tell the story of their 1,000-mile fiber network expansion project that is now reaching completion there in Huntsville, Alabama. So in addition to the sharing of information, it can serve as a bit of a victory lap for Wes Kelly and the entire Huntsville Utilities team. And finally, unfortunately, we did run out of great leaders to invite to this year's panel, but I was able to bring in my former college roommate to participate, Justin Webb. Justin is the co-founder and executive chairman of AgriWebb, an Aussie-based ag tech firm that relies on advanced connectivity to add efficiency to the global agricultural industry, addressing critical global food production needs. So I hope you find today's presentation enjoyable, educational, and even in a small way inspiring as you continue your pursuit to achieving connectivity excellence in your city, in your community. Speed, strength, leadership. It was a few years ago, at the invitation of US Ignite, that I was fortunate enough to be at an event at the White House. We were there in the Eisenhower Executive Office building when US Ignite's executive director, my good friend Bill Wallace, asked a few of us in the room to describe the 3 words that come to mind when thinking about a community or a city that is working to establish connectivity as a cornerstone of its planning principles. There were certainly a number of other descriptors that were introduced by those there in the room that would apply: equity, disruptive, innovative, importance, excitement. But for me, the 3 words that best define a city or a community that is working to achieve wired and wireless connectivity excellence are best embodied by the words speed, strength, leadership. With great leadership comes the ability to put together a structured plan and then the ability to execute on that plan. That is how these communities can secure citywide investments in high quality, ultra fast, wired, and wireless networks. And that is what leads to stronger cities, more resilient cities. So the importance of broadband has never been more clear. In the isolated world that has become our reality, if there was one thing holding our economy and many of the critical parts of society together, it is broadband connectivity. And of course, that is only for those fortunate to have access to it. And while many do, there are far too many who still do not. In rural markets, and arguably even more so in urban markets, there are too many residents, businesses, and anchor institutions who do not have access to high quality, competitively priced, wired, and wireless connectivity. And that is why events like Mountain Connect are so valuable and why your participation is so important. The opportunity to come together, share ideas, perspectives, lessons learned, best practices can be invaluable when seeking opportunities to meet the challenge that many cities and communities are faced with today. So much of the topics discussed here at Mountain Connect are focused on going forward programs and strategies, and rightly so. But as part of this keynote, I thought it relevant and hopefully interesting to start off by taking a look at a historical event when talking about smart infrastructure. And that is the deployment of industry's first fiber to the home networks. Sometimes when charting a path forward, there can be great value in looking back. And what I find fascinating, and I hope that you might as well, is that the genesis for the industry's first fiber to the home network was driven by a need that many community and city leaders are still focused on today: economic development. The year was 1985, and in Central Florida, a businessman named Gino Paolucci, who at the time was the second largest private landholder in the state of Florida behind the Walt Disney Company, wanted to convert his land holdings into a new master plan community. The land was originally used for growing of water chestnuts and other produce that was used in Gino's food empire. That included brands such as Chung King Chinese food and Gino's Pizza Rolls. Gino's Pizza Rolls, of course, were renamed Totino's Pizza Rolls after Gino sold the brand to Pillsbury. You might remember some of the old commercials.
Hot, delicious pizza. What a winner! Mmm, the irresistible taste of pizza in this hot little bite-sized snack.
Gino's Pizza? Wait a second. Totino's Pizza Rolls. The same zesty pizza taste now from Totino's.
So Gino had this bold vision to convert his land holdings into a new development project, a master plan community named Heathrow. A new area that would one day be filled with thousands of new homes, enterprise and retail businesses, schools, essentially a whole new city. The only problem was no one lived there yet, and no one really had reason to live there. It was the middle of Central Florida. It was 40 minutes away from the nearest major place of commerce, which was Disney World. There was no real reason anyone would want to relocate to Heathrow. But Gino knew that for Heathrow to be successful, he would have to find a way to attract commerce to that area. So he gathered a planning team, and together they recognized that there had to be a connection between communication and economic development. And if there were an opportunity to improve communication, to improve connectivity, perhaps that could serve as a catalyst for growth. Well, after a great deal of planning and coordinating amongst numerous industry players, what emerged was the industry's first fiber to the home deployment. So sometimes when you hear of a historical event, it's sometimes too abstract to really get an understanding of the inputs that went into the creation of such an event. So today I want to invite you into the offices of the Broadband Group, over to what really is our humble hall of history, but starts off and leading the way with the images capturing the events that led to the industry's first fiber to the home project. And here, what is truly a distinguished group of individuals from a wide range of the telecommunications industry. This was the room where the industry's first fiber to the home network was created. Here, sitting in the front row, at the far right, Frank Stanton, the president emeritus of CBS Corporation. Mr. Stanton actually hired Edward R. Murrow over the course of his career. Next to Mr. Stanton, Gordon Wiley, president of Paolucci International. Next to him, John Clendenin, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Bell South Corporation. Sitting next to Mr. Clendenin is, of course, Gino Palucci, and then to his immediate left is Leonard Wrench, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Cox Communications. Prior to his role with Cox, Mr. Wrench actually served as the press secretary of President John F. Kennedy. In the back row, the President of Southern Bell, Florida, Vice President of Bell South, Vice President of Southern Bell, General Counsel, Bell South Corporation, President, Bell South Services, and of course, my personal favorite, here in the gray suit, a young Tom Reiman, who is, of course, my father and the President of the Broadband Group. What's so relevant about how this network actually came to be is that the service providers didn't come knocking on Heathrow's door and saying, Mr. Reiman, Mr. Palucci, we want to do something different here. We want to invest in a way that we've never done so. It took the leadership of the planning team, of Gino Palucci, of Tom Reiman, pictured here with the Executive Vice President of Southern Bell, Dick Snelling, who many might remember, who went to them and said, we're going to put together a structure that works within your metrics, works within your economics, but it's going to advance the interests of this development community and is also going to advance the interests of your companies. With the network in place, it was now time to prove the model. Was the planning team's thesis accurate that improved connectivity infrastructure would lead to improved opportunities for communication, which would lead to opportunities for economic development? Well, they went out to go and speak with companies about the potential for corporate relocation. At that time, AAA, the American Automobile Association, had announced that they were looking to move their headquarters out of Falls Church, Virginia, and were exploring opportunities in either Florida or in Texas. Well, the Heathrow planning team spoke with AAA, introduced the fiber optic network that was put in place, and AAA acknowledged that at their core, they're a communications company. 1-800-AAA-HELP. And with that fiber optic network in place, that could improve the quality and reliability of the calls that were constantly coming in, improving their overall business operations. Ultimately, AAA selected Heathrow for their corporate relocation, forever changing the growth trajectory of Heathrow and the entire Central Florida region. Now, did AAA select Heathrow because of the fiber optic network in and of itself? Of course not. But it was another input that they were able to differentiate themselves, for AAA to be able to check that box, for Heathrow to offer something that no other area was offering at that time. So here we are, 35 years later, and developers of master plan communities continue to recognize the value in taking a proactive role to position their new developments with the communication infrastructure that buyers increasingly expect. In fact, it was a master plan community located just south of Denver in the city of Lone Tree, where in 2005 became Colorado's first fiber to the home deployment. The development is Ridgegate, and in its early days of design, Ridgegate worked to create a structure that would encourage investment by the local phone company in a fiber optic network long before that provider would have made such an investment on its own. The phone company was Qwest, which then became US West, and of course today is CenturyLink, who made that initial investment at Ridgegate and really helped to define that community as a leading connected development. With the fiber network in place, Ridgegate ultimately became home to Charles Schwab's 650,000 square foot Colorado campus, and also home to a major HCA hospital, the Skyridge Medical Facility, and of course, hundreds of homes with thousands more planned in the pipeline. Ridgegate is now moving forward on the next phase of its development with wired and wireless connectivity designed into every aspect of the community, incorporating conduit throughout the project and bringing in multiple fiber providers, pre-planning the location of future cellular wireless vertical infrastructure, positioning Ridgegate with the level of connectivity that will be expected by residents and businesses while protecting the development's carefully planned aesthetics. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Ridgegate East.
This is a new chapter in the story of Ridgegate. The west side of the community is 95% complete, and the east side of Ridgegate is now underway. Ridgegate has become a regional gateway for the South Metro Denver corridor. And as we evolve, we're adding even more vibrancy for businesses and residents, for cultural and civic organizations, and for a connection to nature and light rail.
On the east side of Ridgegate, the Lone Tree City Center will be a 400-acre urban destination. The heart of the city center will span 32 city blocks, about the same size as Cherry Creek North. Picture a vibrant, new downtown for Lone Tree, with easy access to light rail and walkable mixed-use neighborhoods. Corporate campuses and large retail will be situated along the perimeter of the district. The city center will house up to 5,000 residents and up to 35,000 workers. It's going to enhance the quality of living and working here, with a new level of connectivity within the city and throughout the Denver metro region.
There will be 2 more commercial districts on the east side of Ridgegate. The Lincoln Avenue Commercial District will sit at the north edge, next to the new CU South Denver campus. The Ridgegate Village Center will be walkable from the surrounding neighborhoods. Shea Homes has been selected as the master home builder for the Southwest Residential Village, the first of 3 residential villages here. Ultimately, the east side will provide about 8,000 new homes, including 350 units of affordable housing, and more than 600 acres of parks, trails, and natural habitat.
The economic impact of the east side of Ridgegate will be significant for Lone Tree and the entire region. The city center and commercial districts will provide upwards of 12 million square feet of office, retail, and medical space, and up to 35,000 new jobs.
In total, Ridgegate spans 3,500 acres or 6 square miles. The east and west sides of the community are connected by a 4-lane bridge and 2 other major thoroughfares. Pioneer businesses and residents of the east side will have easy access to all of the amenities that are thriving on the west side. The master plan, phased implementation, and natural land preservation of Ridgegate reflect our ongoing commitment to best practices in smart, sustainable community development.
Of course, when thinking about connectivity, it is no longer just developers of new greenfield master plan communities who recognize the need to take a proactive role in addressing the connectivity needs of their residents and their businesses. Today's cities, large and small, understand that they can no longer just sit back and wait for it to potentially meet the investment criteria for a service provider to make the necessary broadband infrastructure investments needed to provide the critical services that their residents and businesses are expecting, including access to telehealth services, distance education programs, and opportunities to advance commerce, such as ensuring work from home opportunities are available to all residents. Of course, acknowledging the problem is easy. Identifying the solution is challenging. Right? There is a reason why there are so many underserved regions throughout the country, especially here in the Mountain West region. And that reason, of course, is economics. As introduced by Blair Levin. Blair Levin, the former chief of staff at the FCC and lead author of the FCC's National Broadband Plan, made the observation that under traditional economics, the cost of deploying new or improved broadband infrastructure is often greater than the economic benefits that can be achieved for an individual service provider. Simply put, under the traditional legacy approach of investing in new or improved broadband infrastructure simply does not work. So, what do we do? Well, as Blair would say, if the math doesn't work, in order to deploy fiber broadband networks in areas where it is not being done, we must identify a way to change the math. And while many new models are being explored, and some may eventually prove to have merit, it is relevant to understand the models that are working. In that regard, today we will look at one city who had a vision, put together a plan, executed on that plan, and now has successfully completed that plan. Huntsville, Alabama, and the city-owned utility launched what today is now widely referred to as the utility lease model. A few years ago, Huntsville Utilities knew that they needed more fiber in their network for their own internal operational needs. They needed more communication capability. It had to happen. Same time, the mayor announced the city's goal of becoming a true gigabit city. Will the two work together to identify a structure to advance the grid modernization needs of the utility while addressing the connectivity expectations of the city? Together, they effectively changed the map, and what was once, just a few years ago, an underserved city now has multiple providers offering gigabit connectivity citywide.
Parent company Alphabet just launched Google Fiber in Huntsville, Alabama. The fast gigabit internet service utilizes fiber from local utilities rather than laying new fiber optic cables. The decision to lease the infrastructure rather than building it is an example of CFO Ruth Porat's attempts to cut costs. Porat said fiber's costs have been the primary driver of the $325 million in capital expenditures from Alphabet's Other Bets business unit. Alphabet says the next city to get the fiber service will be Louisville, Kentucky. The bottom line, Alphabet is cutting costs with its latest Google Fiber launch.
It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. Wes Kelly, President and CEO, Huntsville Utilities.
I appreciate this opportunity to share a little bit about Huntsville Utilities and our fiber journey that we've been on for what seems like a long time, but we all know that time moves very quickly when you're dealing with fiber construction and fiber projects that transform a community. So Huntsville is a smart city, and a smart city deserves smart infrastructure. So Huntsville got its founding way back in the old cotton field days of Alabama. It was just a typical agrarian community, and it was going along and doing its thing, and then all of a sudden in the 1950s a bunch of German scientists ended up here and they transformed America through the space program. NASA got its start here, the Saturn V was designed and built here, man went to the moon from the activities that took place here in Huntsville. And that tradition has remained. We remain a dominant player in the defense and aerospace industry, and we have a lot of engineers and a lot of really smart people that make their living off of what's in their mind and how they can communicate and share all of that information and collaborate with people around the globe. So Huntsville needs to step up to the plate and provide this community the infrastructure that it needs to meet its particular mission. All the way back in 2010, Google stood up the Google City Project, and that was an exciting endeavor, certainly generated a lot of press releases and a lot of comments as cities across the United States stepped up and said, Google, come build fiber in our community. Huntsville was no different, but what it did do is it piqued interest and it got city leaders thinking, so that by 2013, the mayor was putting together a strategy. By 2014, he announced that strategy out to the community, and then in 2015, an RFI went out to all the telecommunication providers saying, hey, Huntsville has a need, help us with that need. Well, a couple of months later, early in 2016, Google stepped forward and said, wait a minute, there may be an opportunity here. And the opportunity was to partner with us at Huntsville Utilities. We're the electric, water, and wastewater infrastructure provider in this community, and we already had a fiber network that linked number of our infrastructure, but really we needed to grow it. We needed to support all of our substations. We needed to support our new metering systems. We needed to support our water tanks and our gas booster stations and equipment scattered all over this community. But our city also needed to connect police departments and fire stations and public rec and all the other things that are part of the city. When you start to lay all that together, you realize that is an extensive fiber network that stretches almost to every corner of the community. So it seemed like there was an opportunity to take that surplus fiber and to partner with Google that they could lease that fiber from us on a long-term basis, 20-year basis as a matter of fact. And they provide that, they take that fiber and they provide services out to our residents. So we're the infrastructure provider, we're providing the dark fiber resources, they're lighting that fiber, they're providing that technology to the customer in really a best case scenario where the high-tech company is providing the high-tech services, the stable and secure infrastructure provider is providing that infrastructure. And it has generated good results for our community, both in the aerospace and in the automotive sector. Huntsville has seen a boom, whether it's Mazda, Toyota, whether it's Blue Origin, whether it's Boeing, whether it's Northrop Grumman. I mean, you name the large defense and aerospace companies, they take notice of the fact that Huntsville has stepped up in this way. And again, in the automotive space, that's an area that sort of caught us by surprise. But they're very similar. These people deal with large data sets, complex analysis, and they need high bandwidth capabilities to do that. Now in the COVID situation, we are so blessed. We have a multitude, literally a multitude of fiber to the home providers in our community. Our residents have multiple choices, and working from home is no problem. Gigabit service, no problem. Matter of fact, Google right now is testing 2 gigabit residential service in our community. So we've been relatively stressed as we go through the development process and figure it all out and get it constructed and take care of all the business you have to take care of, but there is no question that we've been blessed. And we continue to do this for the benefit of our community, for our ratepayers, and to make sure that this infrastructure stays here for a long time so that our community thrives for a long time. So I appreciate this brief opportunity to share a little about the Huntsville story and the unique partnership that came into place by us building the infrastructure, the private telecom provider leasing that infrastructure, and then them providing the retail services out to the customer. So I appreciate the time, and I hope you have a great conference.
Huntsville Utilities is a great success story because it just makes sense. The utility had to put more fiber in their network for their own internal operational needs. Through the lease model, they effectively turned what would otherwise be a cost center into a revenue-generating asset. At the same time, they removed the traditional barrier of entry for a new provider to enter the market and provide competitively priced, fiber-based broadband services. Grid modernization is long overdue, and it must occur. And the only way the grid of the future can be achieved is with added intelligence incorporated into the grid. New technologies, all requiring fast, reliable connectivity. Connectivity that is best achieved with the deployment of fiber infrastructure. You know, it's the classic story that if Alexander Graham Bell were ever shown an iPhone, he would have no idea how it would function. Yet if Thomas Edison were here and took a look at the US power grid, it would all make perfect sense to him. Innovation has to occur. The utility lease model advances the grid modernization thesis by advancing the deployment of more fiber, more smart infrastructure, facilitating essentially everything that falls under the smart grid umbrella: advanced metering infrastructure, demand response, wide area situational awareness, and increased management of distributed energy resources, wind, solar generation, distribution grid management, load balancing, storage, fault isolation, location, and service restoration. Grids are no longer just pushing information. It has to have the capability of controlling the flow of energy and balancing the grid as different sources originating in different locations travel in different directions. You know, they say the modern grid's job isn't only to keep the lights on, but to do so cost effectively while releasing as few emissions as possible. And there can be great economics achieved as well. At yesterday's keynote, we of course heard from Chattanooga. Chattanooga boasts that the smart grid in their area has reduced power outages by an average of 60%. They make the claim that considering power outages cost a community the size of Chattanooga about $100 million per year due to lost productivity, the smart grid there saves the community about $60 million annually. Of course, this is a macro number, but $60 million, that's material. Additionally, Chattanooga talks how the smart grid has reduced the need for truck rolls to scout and troubleshoot faults. This has resulted in a reported reduction of 630,000 truck driving miles and 4.7 million pounds of carbon emissions. The benefits of the smart grid is real and it's material, but it's also expensive. And that is the beauty of the utility lease model. It changes the math and allows for investment of the smart grid in areas it would not or could not otherwise occur. When looking to create a wired or wireless network deployment plan, it is important to remember that broadband for the sake of broadband rarely will garner the support that is going to be needed for any smart infrastructure plan to be realized. As a local leader, it is important to identify and clearly define the programs that would be advanced if and when needed connectivity infrastructure were deployed. There are, of course, so many industries and social programs that benefit from, or in many cases rely on, access to fast and reliable connectivity. The modern economy is too dependent on being connected to have so many remain underserved. Identifying use cases, be it advancing the smart grid, enabling distance education programs, or perhaps to secure a new corporate relocation to advance local commerce. The more benefits that can be defined locally, the more support your program will be achieved. One example of an industry that is innovating from technology and access to connectivity is farming and agriculture. Finishing off today's presentation is my longtime friend, Justin Webb, whose ag tech company is helping to address one of the most critical issues our world must increasingly address: farm management and food production. Please meet Mr. Andrew Justin Webb.
Good morning. Thank you to Jeffrey for having me join his insightful presentation on advancing smart infrastructure, speed, strength, and leadership. As Jeffrey's roommate at Harvard, I can confidently say that Jeff holds at least one of those characteristics. Of course, I'll leave it to you to determine which and under what circumstances he best exemplifies said trait. Look, I'm honored to be joining you from Sydney, Australia, where global travel restrictions from the COVID pandemic have highlighted the desperate need for reliable global broadband infrastructure. But what better conduit through which to challenge you remotely as listeners, as broadband aficionados, and as compassionate thinkers for the advancement of humanity? In essence, the biggest challenge facing the world today is not, despite Jeff's passionate search for his best Instagram filter, more data for selfies. It's the challenge of food production. By 2050, the world will need to feed over 11 billion people. That's about 56% more world to feed. We already use more than 50% of the world's vegetated land for agriculture, so we can't get more land. And we already have an agricultural production paradigm that makes up more greenhouse gas emissions than all our cars, trucks, trains, and airplanes combined. While there are currently some inefficient supplementary solutions like lab-grown or plant-based chemical meats, the rising demand for real quality protein and the traceable food supply is a problem that threatens the very crux of our existence. Am I being dramatic? Well, if wars have been fought historically over a 30% shift in oil prices, what happens when people cannot find the food to put on our family's table? The good news is that we, on this call, in this conversation, at this conference, have the power to shift the paradigm. Agricultural technology, or ag tech, is at its core the digitization and exchange of on-farm records and protocols of food production to increase productivity. Ultimately, we, as producers and consumers, are all seeking to sustainably increase output while maintaining or reducing inputs, which by definition is an increase in productivity. Now, technology is ideally and uniquely placed to be a solution to this productivity paradox. Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture, addressed the issue of a desperate need for technology in US farming during his keynote at the USDA's 96th Annual Agricultural Outlook Forum. There he discussed the USDA's Innovation Imperative Initiative. Now, despite the spicy title, this incentivizes the cloud-based and broadband-enabled tools on farm. The goal is to advance the US to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. Look, this is a clear example of the multiplier effect and the potential scale of investment in agricultural technology. Imagine for a moment how much more value agriculture could provide, not just in the billions of dollars of production, but in terms of traceable quality and marketable provenance. If the broadband industry worked hand in hand in collaboration to enable ranchers to have access to the latest tools and technology, the cumulative benefits of productivity, provenance, and robust socioeconomic benefit is immense. And the benefits don't stop there. With regenerative open grazing or grass-fed practices, agriculture is the only industry that, through encouraged and incentivized proliferation of technology and operational practices, can become sustainably and demonstratively carbon negative. Not just reduce carbon footprint, but become outright a net negative by pulling more carbon out of the atmosphere than it produces. Finally, the US holds an ephemeral opportunity to immediately implement true food security from field to fork, unlocking not only domestic consumers, but international export markets, such as the UK, that are demanding evidentiary provenance for a food demand that outstrips their domestic production by nearly double. Now, AgriWebb, my company, is a farm management and supply chain software. Cloud-based, it was founded 5 years ago in Australia. Since then, it has grown to manage over 12 million cattle across over 78 million acres around the world. From our Denver-based office, AgriWebb's customer base verified that the average user of AgriWebb has increased annual productivity by 9.2% per year, which equates across our user base to about a $43,000 on average gain in productivity. In the US context of 750,000 farms, that equates to a potential GDP contribution of over 32 billion in productivity gains every year and over 1.6 billion in cost savings. In the esteemed audience listening, we have true visionaries, dreamers, and practical magicians of engineering. And I put it to you, the architects of our future, that there is no more compelling challenge or reason to unlock disruptive technologies than the impact we can have on global food production. I put it to you that this is not one of the reasons for you to be inspired. It is the reason for the great enablement of disruptive technologies. Thank you for your attention and for your commitment to our future. If you'd like to learn more, or better yet, come and join the AgriWebb journey, please contact me via AgriWebb. Thank you again.
Thank you again for the opportunity to contribute to this year's program. I hope you found the presentation illuminating and, at least in a small way, inspiring. Hearing how the history of smart infrastructure deployments, the start of the fiber to the home network builds really started because of and continues because of great leadership. With great leadership comes the opportunity for investment in needed wired and wireless connectivity, which leads to stronger cities, more resilient cities, stronger communities. Speed, strength, leadership. I'm Jeff Reiman with the Broadband Group. Have a great Mountain Connect 2020.